for more on this, we're going to be joined via video link by Umunyana Rugege, Head of Human Rights UNAIDS East and Southern Africa on Zero Discrimination Day. Umunyana, good afternoon and thank you for joining us here on the SABC at this hour.
Hi, Liesl. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's look at how upholding everyone's rights is ultimately the responsibility of all of us, and everyone can also play their part in ending discrimination. Talk to the theme of this year, the focus of what we can expect.
Yes, so the theme for Zero Discrimination this year is to protect everyone's health. We must protect everyone's rights. And this is a global theme. So we know that stigma and discrimination related to HIV has been with us since the beginning of the pandemic. But we also know and have known for a long time that protecting human rights as part of the response and not just focusing on the biomedical is really essential, because we want to get people into care, we want to get people into treatment, because we also know that treatment is prevention. So we need to ensure that people who are vulnerable to HIV and people who are living with HIV are able to access services, and that we are seeing greater and greater political commitment to ensure that we address HIV-related stigma and discrimination everywhere, not just in health settings, also in the workplace, ensuring that corporates are also addressing this and that there's no discrimination on the basis of HIV. And in South Africa, we also know that gender-based violence is a driver of the HIV pandemic. And so we need to address all of these issues. So women's rights and sexual and reproductive health rights are all part of protecting people's rights and addressing the HIV response.
No, absolutely. As we look at the issue of health and HIV, I mean, in the southern region, the region has made great progress towards the goal of ending AIDS as a public health threat by 2030. And so as we look at the strides that have been taken, the progress that has been made to empower citizens at large, what are you witnessing as we speak?
So I think there's a great deal of progress. And as you say, in the East and Southern African region, we've seen the greatest amount of progress.
Yes.
But we're still seeing that adolescent girls and young women tend to be disproportionately affected by HIV. In this region, they account for 63% of new infections. And so we really need to pay attention to those numbers and ensure that the communication that's going out to young people and to women in particular actually addresses the issues that they face. In the younger age group, the 15 to 19 age group in East and Southern Africa, 77% of new infections are among females. So we know that we really need to focus on the rights of women and girls. One of the projects at UNAIDS that we have is the Education Plus initiative, which tries to ensure that girls are empowered and are able to stay in school, because we know there's evidence that shows that if girls stay in school, then they're less likely to become infected with HIV. And so we must continue to really focus on that age group. But at the same time, there are other key populations that need to be prioritized as well.
Yes.
And we've seen in South Africa the rollout of PrEP, which is really important in giving women and other key populations those tools to be able to protect themselves and have those kinds of instruments that they can use themselves and don't rely on their partners, and so on, and they can go ahead and live their lives. And ultimately, you know, the idea of zero discrimination is to ensure that everyone is able to live their own life with dignity and to have access to the right to health.
No, absolutely. And as we assess the strides that have been taken, some of the challenges that still exist with regards to law, policy, even practices that, you know, discriminate against, even stigmatize women and children, the LGBTQI plus community, marginalized communities where they have their human rights violated. They cannot access HIV prevention. They cannot get tested or receive treatment and care. What comes to the fore on that front?
So I think that's such an important point, Liesl. We know, and there is evidence that shows that public health is undermined when you have laws and policies and practices and norms that enshrine punishment and discrimination instead of enshrining protections and rights. And in particular, we're seeing a rash of anti-LGBT laws. The Ghanaian parliament just yesterday passed a bill that further criminalizes the LGBT community. Potentially, they can be jailed just for expressing that identity or for organizing around the issues that they face, for setting up organizations that are concerned about the rights of these different groups. And it tends to be sexual minorities and other minorities like migrants and like people who use drugs, who are increasingly, particularly in the African continent, people who use drugs are increasingly facing challenges and criminalization. And so we know that by dealing with these types of laws and removing the punitive nature of the legal framework in countries, then you will see people able to access healthcare services without stigma and without discrimination. But if we have these types of laws in place, then we're merely sending people away from care rather than pulling people into care. We're sending organizations underground, the organizations that will give proper and meaningful information to young people. Instead of them getting information from social media where there's so much misinformation, we need to be able to communicate in a way that speaks to these groups and ensures that they're able to access the health system.
Umunyana, thank you very much for joining us on the SABC at this hour and for weighing in. We'll leave that conversation there for now. Umunyana Rugege, Head of Human Rights, UNAIDS, East and Southern Africa, really weighing in on the issue as we look at what comes to the fore, Zero Discrimination Day. Some of the strides that have been taken, but obviously also looking at some of the challenges that continue to persist with regards to policies and practices. Special focus on health and HIV, of course, as per the theme this year.